Welcome everybody to another edition of FGI TV. I'm Jeff Bergerson. My screen name on daily sites is JT Bergerson. I'm joined as always by my partner, Zach Turcott. His screen name is Mysteriously. We're with FantasyGolfInsider.com, a premium website for you fantasy golf players. If you haven't seen our site and become a premium member, check us out. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's the button right below this webcast here, so be sure to do that. That would help us out quite a bit. This will be our last webcast for a couple of weeks. So we have a little break in between the Tour Championship this week and the Fries.com in a couple of weeks. We're going to be busy working. We're going to roll out some additional awesome content that you're absolutely going to love. So we're going to use that 2 weeks to get some new stuff on the website. So stay on board. Fall season's the most profitable is what we've found. So we're going to be back to full fields, deeper value plays on the daily fantasy sites.
A lot of new guys, a lot of new names.
A lot of new guys coming into the tour, and we're going to take advantage of it because not a lot of people will be on them. So stay tuned. We're excited for that. Also, I'm going to be on Pat Mayo on Tuesday. Be sure to tune in there. If you like his show, he's one of the few who still does a lot of golf even during football season. Shoot him a tweet, let him know that you appreciate it. We sure do. He's good for the industry. He's friends of ours. So be sure to shoot him a tweet and thank him for keeping up with the golf. Before we get to the Tour Championship this week, we take a look back last week at the BMW Championship. It didn't take long for fireworks within the first few holes of Jim Furyk's round. Sure. He withdraws with a wrist injury. It's a good thing we told you guys to fade him last week. We didn't tell you to fade him because we knew he was going to withdraw with a wrist injury. We didn't know he was hurt, and they don't release that information. But we said he was too overpriced. He was going to be owned by a big share of the field, like 26% in some contests. So we were right on that, and just happened to be lucky that he withdrew. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things where with golf, they just haven't quite figured it out the way the NFL has yet in terms of injuries. I think as the PGA realizes that there's more and more folks that are getting on board with this kind of thing, they'll start to dig into it a little bit better. You'll start to see the Golf Channel and maybe some of the other sports networks a little more boots on the ground in the days leading up to it, or at least trying to get the players to disclose what's going on, because clearly nothing really a couple weeks before has had to have been something where he had injured it in the interim or along the way, because he was fine on his way to a fourth place finish just a couple weeks before at the Deutsche Bank. So there certainly weren't any real major issues there. So for him to say in an interview that he'd barely been able to qualify or get through the Pro-Am round before having to get to the next day and then plays 5-6
He had
holes.
to trot out. He couldn't just say, look, it's not good after the Pro-Am. I'm just not going to play, and everyone would be fine with it. But instead, he screws over a lot of people. Luckily, FGI wasn't part of that, but that happens. We've been on the other side of that, obviously.
Many, many times. I was just thinking, how did we manage to matrix our way away from these bullets over here? I think we got hit by Russell Knox one week. We got hit by Dustin Johnson, obviously. Paul Casey. Don't say it.
Let's not even talk about Paul Casey.
So we've been there over and over. So I was actually more shocked than anything else that we didn't have him in a huge.
We missed it.
A huge lineup. Had him in a few small ones, but nothing terribly substantial. So
besides the Furyk injury, tell us a little bit about last week. What you took from it.
Jason Day is still pretty good.
He's
guess,
good at golf.
Yeah, after getting that extra week of rest, he looked really sharp. He did struggle a little bit at Deutsche Bank after having won a couple straight events. Obviously, we had owned him on the team while we were out in Boston, so that may have done something to kind of bring his game down a little bit. But he came out just firing for the pin right away, sinking putts all over the place, birdies, eagles galore. He's -10 after the first day, -18 after the second day, ties it to a record for best first 2-round start. And it was really kind of over at that point. I mean, after Friday afternoon, Day's one of those guys who's just not going to blow tournaments. It's not one of these guys who kind of rises up from nowhere, and if it's a guy like Charlie Hoffman, I think he did a couple weeks back, that he's coming back down. He's going to blow up at some point. With Jason Day, he gets a 5-6 stroke lead going into day 3, day 4. It's pretty well lights out, and so at that point, it was just the rest of the field kind of chasing him down. Some of those upper tier level guys trying to make a run to get into that top 5 points position range. Because as you may or may not know, anybody who was in the top 5 going into the Tour Championship event can still win the Tour Championship outright. They can win the FedEx Cup outright by having a win at the Tour Championship. So really key as far as getting above that 6 to 5 mark there and giving yourself a chance to still win the overall title going into the weekend.
It's just $10 million.
It doesn't seem like the pro. Whenever we talk about this, it really doesn't seem like it's something that's on the pros' mind all that much. I can withdraw from this tournament. My back's a little sore. I'll sit this one out. You know, they maybe don't play 2-3 months out of the summer, skip over 7-8 tournaments and a lot of position points.
Like Martin Keimer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's just a lot of guys where it's just not that big of a deal. I think $10 million. The guys who really care about it, they're kind of the ones that are down at the bottom, scrounging away, praying that they have a chance to even qualify to get to the top. But all the guys who are actually in contention, for the most part, it still doesn't seem like it motivates them nearly as much as the other 4 majors during the year. So I don't know what the PGA can really do about that. I think this is about as good as it's going to get for them.
They've made a lot of tweaks. There's nothing they can do to motivate these guys. The ad dollars are just too great for these guys. Sergio Garcia, with the points quadrupled in the FedEx Cup playoffs, he still elects not to play in 2 events. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't get it.
A lot of rumblings on Sergio. Haven't really figured that one out. Was trying to read through the Twitter sphere a little bit over the last couple of weeks. You know, some people said there was no issue at all. Some people said there were some family issues. That I actually heard one individual tweeting about how he may actually be battling some type of depression, or his head may not actually be on the game at this point. So hearing a lot of different things about Sergio. You can tell things are a little bit off this season. He just doesn't seem like he's enjoying being out on the course. Doesn't seem like he's enjoying playing golf at this point this year. I mean, typically Sergio has a number of top 10 finishes, you know, kind of sprinkled throughout the year. This year it was tough going. They really were tough to come by. Had a real nice run at the Players Championship back in May, and Ricky Fowler played out of his mind to end up beating him. But other than that, a very, very quiet year for Sergio. So it'll be really interesting, I think, to see in the off season if anything kind of materializes over what's developed in this last month or so.
The big surprise, Daniel Berger. Yeah, I don't know how a guy goes from missing 7 straight cuts to all of a sudden returning to the form that we saw earlier this year, which is the guy's a real talented player. So he bounced back with a runner-up finish last week. He looked good, wire to wire, pretty much.
12th place the week before, and we've heard interesting rumblings about that. And talking to some of our other writers and friends on Twitter, we've actually heard that it was his girlfriend that kind of traveled along with him all summer when he made 0 cuts. So I think it kind of gets you back into the theory. I mean, every time Tiger kind of messes things up with one of his women, his game tends to jump up a little. Rory McIlroy last year, he's engaged. He's coming right down to the wire. He's starting to feel the squeeze right around his neck or his nuts. He breaks off. He breaks off with things. Bam! #1 player in the world. He's winning majors again. So I guess our message out there
to all you PGA Tour players is what?
I'll keep that to myself.
That's fine. They'll figure it out. Yeah. So that was last week. We move on to this week. Before we do, it's time for your favorite segment, the Shots of the Week segment. We get tons of feedback every week. Positive feedback saying how much you guys like this segment. So we got another real doozy for you this week that we think you're going to like, courtesy of Danny Lee. And we got a tweet from Jason Ribbits, one of our fans out there, who also wanted to see this one. So here we go, courtesy of Shot Tracker. This is a real debacle, I'm warning you.
You have to almost look at this to believe it happens sometimes. It's kind of amazing.
Par 5, 18th hole, which a lot of guys were birdieing. It's 575 yards, right? Shot 1 for Danny, 254 yards to the left fairway. That's a good tee shot, 316 yards from the hole. Layup, have a good chance at birdie. Shot 2, 97 yards to the hole. He's in the fairway. That's a good layup, so now he's got a good approach for birdie. He shoots it to within 35 feet, 3 inches.
Pretty horrible approach
shot. That's not a good approach shot, but he could still 2-putt for par.
He's on the green. It's a green in regulation. Or as our cameraman would say, a greens and regulations.
All right, that putt is to within 3 feet, 5 inches of the hole. So he's going to get out of there with a par, right?
Right.
Hold that thought. He misses the 3-foot, 5-inch putt.
Case of the yips.
That was a lured shot. Now he's 4 feet 8 inches away from the hole. Still okay.
A little bit of work to do.
Except a little bit of work to do. 4-foot putt. He misses that putt. So now he's 2 feet away from it, and on his 6th shot, and then on his 7th shot, he finally gets it to go from 2 feet.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, he was on my best team in the main event this week, so I really enjoyed pulling up my phone and looking it over and seeing that he had lost another few strokes. The guy is almost as maddening. He's been almost as maddening.
Maddening.
Yeah, as upsettingly as inconsistent as Brooks Koepka has been over the last few weeks. Just in terms of he plays just brilliantly for a few holes, 3-4 straight birdies, and then all of a sudden you give it back in just 2 or 3 holes where it all comes undone, and the guy can't hit a shot, and his caddy will tell him, lay up here, don't shoot it for the pin. Shoots it at the pin, shoots it into the junk, loses a few more shots, and then before you know it, he's, instead of being minus or minus 4 to start off the round, he's +2, +3, trying to fight his way back, and once he gets shaken, it just seems to drag him down, just like it does with almost all the other young guys out there. And that's what we're seeing. And I don't know. I think maybe as you look at his numbers over the last month and a half, I think some of it might just be a little bit of fatigue.
Could be.
Because Danny's been such a prolific player on tour this year. I think he is probably the leader in terms of played the most events. Because he's played, I think, 34 or 35 events. I mean, this is a guy who very rarely takes a week off. So I think that could be the case where just kind of mentally and physically, he's starting to wear down. If you notice in the first round of almost every event he plays, and he comes surging out of the gates, -4, -5, he's one of the contenders. And he's been kind of plateauing, hanging in there, staying relatively even, and then down or maybe a little bit of, not really making a real move over the last few days. So I think a lot of it just has to do with fatigue. But he's a brilliant young talent. He's a tremendous iron player. He does usually putt the ball pretty well, just not so much over the last couple of weeks.
So that was thanks to Danny Lee, that shot of the week, and thanks for all your positive feedback. If you ever see something during the weekend and you want us to do a shot to it, you think it's incredibly horrible, we can do that. If it's incredibly good, we can do that as well. It just seems to me that
it's funnier if it's a terrible play.
It is pretty comical.
Yeah, I mean, we could have done Jason Day's 60-foot eagle putt on day 2, but it just would not have had the same comical effect as reading off Danny Lee's shenanigans.
And Danny Lee could have taken some shots after that, off the 18 green.
Yeah, it's always funny when they pick up the ball and just kind of chuck it into the crap or into the water or wherever it is after they bogey. So Danny Lee, thank you for keeping us entertained for the week.
So, preview this week, Tour Championship. A couple key items to note on this week's event. We know it's the top 30 players in the FedEx Cup standings who are going to be competing, so small field. There is not a cut this week, much like last week. So all the players are going to play 4 rounds, with the exception of any withdraws or DQs or anything like that. Sure. We don't know of any injuries out there right now. We'll definitely send out an email if we hear something.
Sure. Be watching Jim Furyk real close this week. It's tough to say. I mean, even if he plays, if he was in such bad shape that he had to pull out after a few holes last Thursday, I have a real hard time thinking
not worth the risk.
All the way back to full health, and even if he does play all 4 rounds, he's not going to be healthy. He's going to be gritting his teeth and fighting his way through. So, although he stacks up really, really well statistically, and as far as some of the things that he's done here in the past, maybe if you're playing in the $3 or the 25-cent arcade, and you're going to build 50 or 100, a couple hundred lineups. Yeah, go ahead and throw a few Furyk teams in there, because if he does happen to recover by some miracle this week, you're going to be happy that you at least had a tiny bit of exposure. But for some of the bigger contests, and obviously if you're going to be playing cash games, I would just stay away from them. It's not worth any of the extra risk in terms of what that is.
I wouldn't be surprised if he pulled out last minute from the event. He's going to wait and put it off as long as he possibly can to see if he's going to be able to. I wouldn't be shocked. The other item to note is we can use tournament history again this week, because it's always at East Lake, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. East Lake is a par 70, 7,300 yards long. like Zach said, there's a lot of different scenarios that can happen, but anyone in the top 5, the Tour Championship is open game to win. The key stats that we're looking at this week are strokes gained tee to green, greens in regulation, par 4 scoring, birdies or better percentage, strokes gained putting, in that order. Does that sound pretty good to you, Zachary?
Yeah, just stick to the basics this week. There's nothing real fancy that we've seen outside of those. So if you just kind of sticking to the basics, I would most heavily weight tee to green game. That tends to be how the playoff courses play out. So tee to green game first, probably par 4 scoring after that, and yeah, you should be pretty good to go.
Big time correlation to greens and regulation success. I put that in the preview article. If you haven't seen that, check it out. It was huge last year. It was amazing when you look at the top 10 guys in greens and regulation and how they finished. So check that out. As far as strategy goes, coming in this week, we got a 30-player field. What are you doing with your bankroll? What are you doing as far as your game selection? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll be taking it down quite a bit, almost down to nothing in terms of my exposure. There's not a lot of reasons to be jumping in there. In a field of 30, almost every lineup possibility is going to be taken. There's only a couple real strategies that you can go with here. And kind of looking over the top when I was building some smaller GPP lineups today, the 2 strategies I came up with, the first would be to take either Day or McIlroy or even Spieth potentially, and then 5 other guys kind of around that 75 to 8,000 range, and then mix and match over and over and over. Do that with any of those guys, and I'm primarily going to be leaning towards Day just for obvious reasons. The game has been so strong for him over the last couple of months that I just think the majority of my exposure for those stars and scrubs type of lineups will be through Jason Day. The other strategy is that you can really put together pretty decent roster of guys kind of below that Day, McIlroy, Spieth, and stack them together. When I was building some of my other lineups, I very easily could fit Justin Rose, DJ, and Bubba onto a team and still have room to put.
Then you got 7,400 left, average player.
Yeah, and you can still go up to 8,000 for another player and drop down for that's a 7,100 or 7,200 there. So I think those are going to be my 2 main strategies for the week. The stars and scrubs, with most of those lineups being weighted towards Jason Day. And then the rest of those will be kind of going a level below and trying to stack 3 studs and then 3 guys right around that 7,000 range. There's not too many guys this week who are totally unplayable. Maybe 1 or 2 guys in that 6,000 range. I'm not playing same buy this week, just so everybody knows that.
Good call.
Probably not. I'm probably not going to grab Stephen Bowditch down there either.
I don't hate Bowditch this week at 6,700 because I think he's capable of jumping up. Overall, I'm going to be taking my bankroll down quite a bit this week. I'm not going to be playing any cash games just because I don't think that we have as big an edge as we normally do. That edge is shrunk with the field. There aren't any deep value plays this week that we can pull out.
Yeah, everybody's got 6 through. Everybody's going to have 6 competent golfers on there. If you and for GPPs, you got to find the winner again, just like last week. If you didn't find you didn't have to have the winner, but it gave you a much more likely chance of being up near the top if you did have them on your own.
I think it's going to look like the Millionaire Maker in that you're going to need 6 guys in the top 10.
Yeah,
and you're going to have to identify probably first and second and then have your other 4 guys in the top 10. So we have to think about that. I'll be playing some GPPs, not as much as I normally do. I'm going to preserve my bankroll for the fall season in a couple weeks where we just have a much larger edge on the field than this week. I'll play some GPPs and enjoy the tournament, but you got to hit it on the screws. So when you're talking about the strategy of doing Day and then 5 other guys in that 7,500 range, if we can stack 3 studs, the top 10 is going to look like last week, where it's going to be littered with those studs. If we can, get 3 guys in the top 10,
you just have extra horses in the race.
Yeah, then we only have to hit 3 of those 7,500.
And the odds just don't seem that likely that Day is going to run away by that big of a margin again this week. I mean, he shouldn't be routing this field by that much.
As easily as he's making it look, it's not that easy to win events. So to bank on him, because he's not that expensive this week, you can easily afford him, and thus I think his ownership's going to be pretty high, I think, very high. Unless they went with Rory to be contrarian. But I like that. So I stacked Stenson, DJ, Bubba, and I have 7,200 left per player. I stacked, like you said, Bubba Rose DJ, and then Fowler Rose Bubba you can even do, and have 7,000 left per player. And I think there's some pretty decent players down there. We obviously took a shot to Danny Lee, but I think he's a decent play here. You couldn't convince me that he has no chance of making the top 10 this week.
No, yeah, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think he's kind of fading here down the stretch, but the talent is certainly there. All parts of his game check out reasonably well. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those fields where a lot of guys could really leap up and make a run. I think there's probably only a handful that this year I would say with some confidence actually have a real good chance of winning it, but plenty of guys could make a run, and there's going to be, like last week where you saw a handful of names and just in the top 5 that you never would have thought would have been up there. You're going to see some of that again this week as well. Is there anybody near the bottom of that list that really stands out for you?
Well, I don't know that I love anyone near the bottom. Jimmy Walker at 6,900.
His price just down,
I've never seen where Jimmy Walker is the third lowest
salary
in any contest ever. But
sure.
Here's the thing with Jimmy Walker is he played pretty well last week. He just didn't have the super low round that other guys had to bump him up in the standings. He didn't have any terrible rounds. I'm not thrilled with him, but for 6,900, if he can free up some dollars to roster 3 studs, can I see Jimmy Walker in the top 10? Yeah, I can definitely see him taking a top 10. So I like him at 6,900. Like I said, Danny Lee at 7,000, and then in the 7,300 range, Streb and Koepka. I mean, we talk about them just about every week. Streb has 9 top 10s this year.
Yeah.
Koepka's a scoring machine.
Yeah, and Streb, he had a very quiet tournament over the weekend, but very quietly finished. I think it was 9 under for the event. So
he was in the mix, which is crazy.
Very respectable. And then obviously, Daniel Berger. Shout out to Pat Mayo here again.
Yep.
His boy has
Berger time.
Risen from the ashes. I mean, he came all the way back. And I think just the way he's played the last couple of weeks, he's definitely got to be a guy that you consider this week, especially for GPP play, now that he's shown you that he has the capability of even winning an event like this. So I think he's definitely a guy when you do your stars and scrubs roster that you should be certainly considering, especially down there at the bottom. So
one of the guys who you had on your $1,500 team last week, Brandt Snedeker.
No, I didn't know him.
Oh, you didn't have him?
No.
We talked about him. He's just not looking right now.
Yeah.
And I have really no interest in him at all this week.
Yeah, he's a guy who's won this event before.
He has won it before.
Yeah.
He just, there's something about his game that
middle
isn't
of
quite
middle
right.
of the year was top 10. He had a win early on in the season, and now he's been off. He had a missed cut a few weeks back. He was looking like he was going to be in position a few weeks ago, and then fell off on the last day. And then there's the last couple of weeks really has not competed much at all, and then he found himself kind of down closer to the bottom after the second day last week. So yeah, I don't think I've got a ton of interest in Snedeker. I mean, the potential's there. He's done it before, but it seems like another guy he's had enough this season, and he's ready to.
He's a pretty easy fade for me.
Yeah. In
that area. Anyone else you like in that middle area?
I think Kevin Na is another guy that I'll probably be looking at. I think he's 71 or 7,200.
Yep.
Yeah, 71. He's a guy who's been really solid throughout the season. He had a real nice stretch in the middle of the year again where he was very strong. He missed 1 or 2 cuts along the way. Hadn't played as great coming into the playoffs. But again, this week he had a real nice event this week. So at that low of a price, it's another guy who frees up quite a bit of money for you. Does everything really well, so he's another guy that I'll definitely be considering this week.
One of the guys who stood out to me this week, and it pains me to say it.
Oh, don't say the name.
Paul Casey.
Oh, you wrote him up this week too.
I hate him so much with every ounce of my being. However, he looks like a decent play this week. He's top 10 in greens and regulation, top 10 strokes gained tee to green. He took 4th here at East Lake like 4 or 5 years ago. He played well on another Donald Ross design at Wyndham. And for
the price.
For the price, he looks like a decent play. With that being said, We got burned by a withdrawal. He has withdrawn from 8 events in his career mid-round. So that's the risk you take. But if you're in a GPP, like you said, a $3 quarter, and you want to throw him on a lineup, I think he could do some damage. I won't personally do it because it hasn't. My wounds haven't healed yet enough.
Here's the deal that I'm willing to offer to Paul Casey
okay.
right here. Maybe we should get the figure out for Paul Casey.
All right.
Paul Casey, here's the deal right here. You pay us $80,000 and we will happily begin to recommend your work to all of our subscribers again. So
that's right.
That's the deal.
That's what you cost us at the Fantasy Golf World
Make that check out to Fantasy Golf Insider, and we'll be good to go. We'll no longer be dragging your name through the mud any longer. So that's all we have to say about that for now. We'll be waiting.
Fair enough.
We'll be waiting for your call.
Who else do you like, Zachary?
I think that's probably getting to be just about it. I think Harris English, his game's been pretty sharp. Over the last few weeks. He was a guy in the middle of the year who was making a lot of cuts for us. He was a good cash game player. Wasn't really a guy I liked all that much in GPPs just due to the weekend fade. Tended to fall apart in round 3 and round 4. Didn't have a great round on Sunday. Didn't help my top team to move up at all in the standings. But overall, still a top 20 finish for a guy who's fairly moderately priced. He's another guy who you can stack with Jason Day and still have plenty of room left over to fit some other guys in there. So I would still give my nod to Harris this week.
My only problem with him is he hasn't had many top 10 finishes.
Top 10s are tough.
Shooting at top 10s, he's not striking me. I'm not saying he couldn't.
But that's the tough part with Day. I mean, there's just you're not going to find too many guys down here in this low 7 range that are even top 10 capable.
Right.
So I think that's. I don't. If you go with Day, if Day ends up winning the tournament this week, it'll be difficult with all those extra points you get for first place. It'll be difficult for you to win a GPP without having him as your lead guy.
That's the risk you run with fading Day and Rory, for that matter. Is if they win, you're screwed. But I'm okay with the strategy. I think that's what I'm going to do this week. I'm going to go with the 3 studs. And I'm going to pair him with, guys like Streb and Koepka and Kisner and Berger down at the bottom because I can see a lot of upside from those guys. You put together 6 guys with a lot of upside, and if things shake down accordingly, then you win a GPP. If not, if Day runs away with it again, you can watch football on Sunday or something, I guess. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. So a couple of other housekeeping items. Like I mentioned earlier before, subscribe to us on YouTube, hit us up on Twitter. Zach Mann's the Twitter account. We're always happy to answer any questions you have on strategy, game selection, bankroll management, because really that's the key to being profitable. It's not just picking the right guys every week. There's more to it than that, and our members will tell you that. Periscope, are you doing Periscope Wednesday night again?
Yeah.
Okay, Zach will do Periscope Wednesday night. That's become a pretty popular thing. Fantasy Aces, if you haven't checked them out, if you're playing on Fantasy Aces, let me know how you're doing. If you're winning in your cash games, what games you're playing, if you're playing any of their GPPs. I like to give them feedback as to what you guys like, and I think from what I'm hearing from most people is they're winning on it. So I want to make sure that we continue to win on Fantasy Aces and build our bankrolls through them too. Otherwise, that's all I got. Just wanted to say thank you again for all your loyalty to Team FGI. Like I said, we'll be back in a short couple of weeks. We'll miss you during that time, but we'll be back firing on all cylinders.
Gonna get a little sleep here these next few weeks.
Well rested, and we'll bring you the best content that we ever have then. So until then, I'm Jeff Bergerson.
Zach Turcott.
We'll see you and have a good week.
Good luck.
8 foot 5 inches.
Right.
Wouldn't that leave him 5 feet away then?
That means he hit it past the hole, but he didn't hit it exactly straight over the hole. Hit it to the little bit left.
I see. So it's a little closer than 5 feet. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Doing a little geometry.
That's
here.
not a good putt.
A little geometry. I'm going to draw you some. Here. We're going to draw you
a flow chart.
A green.
Will you draw Danny Lee's ball going back and forth?
There's a little flag. Here's the ball for Danny Lee because it's way too big for the cup.
Maybe we should do that. Do you have a whiteboard?
I don't. That'd be fun.
That would be hilarious. Here's the hole. Here's Danny's putt, 8 feet away. Zach's going to do a little geometry lesson.